John Hale Evans said, "Old friends are like wine. They grow much sweeter and more valuable as they get older, and they are irreplaceable." A particularly apt description when referring to Sultans of String bassist Drew Birston as he deep dives with us on Yamaha basses. We also caught up with Sultans guitarist Kevin Laliberte as they reflect post-tour on the Yamaha instruments and Line 6 effects they employ on the road. Of course, no exploration of the low notes would be complete without digging into bonus content on dialing in tones using the Ampeg Rocket bass amp. Charles Baudelaire believes one should always be drunk. But with what? With wine, with poetry, or with virtue, as you choose. We choose music because our friends make intoxicating music. Welcome to Yamaha 440 Sessions.
This is an amazing bass, the BB734A, and a couple interesting things about it that I just love. There's so many great design features. One is an active passive bass, which I've always loved because sometimes in the studio you just want a straight up passive bass, and when it's in passive mode you've got a passive tone control right here. So I'll just demo that a bit for you. And I'll put it on like the P bass pickup here. So here's with the tone up. And now with the tone completely off. So really versatile in terms of if you want a passive, more old school bass. And then with a flick of a switch, you've got a really nice preamp here, and I'm going to show you something that's different than a lot of other preamps on other active basses. So here it is in passive, and now active. So the first thing I notice is it's like marginally different. It's not like you hit the switch and it goes like boom, like all of a sudden there's all this low end, and there's maybe, I noticed there's a little more top end, maybe a little bit tighter. So right out of the gate, I like that because the preamp is transparent and it creates a natural sound. So from there, I can add a little bit of bottom end. And if you dial it even more, I'll go to almost 100% here. So very musical, and then I'm going to turn up the mid-range almost to 100% here. And then I'm going to pull it right back so you can hear the scooped effect of it. So And then the treble here, we'll crank that up to almost 100%. And I'm going to grab a pick here and just demonstrate that. So it really helps the pick come out when you crank up the treble in the active mode. And so it's a really nice preamp in that respect. And it's really great live because in different situations, maybe you don't have a front of house person and you can tweak your sound, use your ear, go out to the front of house and kind of tweak your tone with an onboard EQ. So if it's a really boomy room, you just roll off the low end, kind of all obvious stuff. Or if you want some more mids to cut and treble, you can do that easily. So that's one of the things I absolutely love about this bass is the preamp configuration with the bass, mid, and treble, very musical. And it's got a master volume and a pickup blender. So the rear pickup, I'll just demonstrate that here. And then center here. And then right to the neck. And I kind of like having a master volume with a blend. With some of the groups I play with, I like to do like effects and swells. So it allows me to take any setting that I have and do like volume swells. And just kind of effects like that. So it's a nice little bonus that I love about it. And another thing that is kind of like a special feature that not many people might realize the benefits of it is it has a string through option on the back of the bass that comes at it's like a 45-degree angle on the bridge, which is an improvement over some of the previous basses would have just like a 90-degree angle on the string. So it's a lot better for tension, gives you a bit more sustain on the instrument. You have the option to go through just the bridge straight in like a vintage bass. So if you want that sort of feeling and sound, you can do that. I think it even has a reversible bridge depending on the type of articulation you want, which is like crazy flexible. And the thing I love about the strings through, which I'm using right now, is that something I discovered a long time ago on bass is that when the tension's higher, you can have a bit lower action on the bass and still have the tension be fairly high on the string. So when you're playing on sessions or live, you can have a nice low action and not get fatigued on your left hand. The other cool thing, which is a kind of a little secret on this bass, is you can't do this on any average bass, but strings through, and one thing I notice is when you go to do detune stuff, it's really amazing because you can almost get like a 5-string clarity. And I'm going to crank on the preamp a little bit to demonstrate this because I'm going to favor the back pickup here. Okay, so here we go. Yeah, here we go. Just turn up the bass and mids a little bit. But check this out. Like that low C almost resonates like a 5-string bass. Now, not only that, you can actually get pretty decent pitch as you go up the neck. And that's not the case on any 4-string bass. And that's a special thing about these Yamahas that I love with the strings through the body. And I'll just do a little playing demonstration here and I'll hit some drums. Hidden secret about the BB734A. I absolutely love it. This is BBP34 Yamaha Midnight Blue with a rosewood fingerboard, and it's a completely passive bass. I can't thank you enough for introducing me to this bass, Brenton, and I absolutely love it. And I've had the privilege of playing this one and the BB734A, and there's a lot of similarities and there's a lot of differences. Now, the thing that I find different and unique about this one is, first of all, it's all straight up passive, which I'm very at home with, because that's what I grew up playing, was just passive basses, like mostly jazz basses. So I feel really at home with this configuration. And how it works is, I believe the earlier BBs with 2 pickups had a switch, but they've opted to put in volume knobs for each pickup, which is kind of a standard thing for, like, if you see a lot of mods on PJ basses, they'll wire them like this. And I quite like it because it really, with these 3 knobs and the 2 pickups, you can get quite a different variety of tones and effects. So I really love the configuration of the bass. Just to talk briefly about the construction about this bass, I love this bass a lot. It's kind of my go-to bass at the moment for touring and taking on shows, local and on the road, and for a couple reasons. It's really solid. It's very well designed, and a lot of my vintage basses have issues with the neck. Maybe the necks aren't on as solid, and they will shift, you know, on a flight or during the gig. And so Yamaha has taken good care of that, because this is a 5-bolt neck with actually 2 bolts that come in at the neck at like pretty much a 45-degree angle to really hold it in place. So, and that does a few things. First of all, it's very stable. So for taking on the road, it's great. But also tonally, when you have a nice solid fit like that with no gaps and really solid, it makes for a great sustained, like, beautiful tone as well. And on that note, the neck, I believe it's a 5-piece design with, I think it's mahogany that runs up these stripes here, with a maple neck and rosewood fingerboard. And these also give the neck stability, which is really important too, like on the road, because you arrive in a completely different climate, and your bass will still be solid and stay in tune for the show, and you won't have to adjust too much. And when it does come time to adjust, Yamaha's made it really easy on their basses to access the truss rod, and it comes with wrenches. So with one tweak, you can get a straighter neck or more convex, and also adjust the bridge. It's got the option, as most of their basses actually do, with the strings through that I love. I have it strung up with that right now, and or straight through the bridge like a vintage bass. And I just absolutely love this bass. And sonically, it's kind of a little bit deceiving because it almost has the properties of like an active bass in so far as it's like very clear. It's got great definition, great sustain, and yet it's a passive bass. So I'll just give you a little demonstration here. So really nice clarity. I've got both pickups right now running, so it's got kind of a tighter sound to it. And then a great P-bass sound also, and I'll demonstrate that with drums again. I'll play the same line. So really nice tone on that too, a bit fatter and still tight. And then you've got the back pickup, which I just love for so many different reasons. This is the back pickup with the tone fully up. Just a really nice clear sound, very focused mid-range. The low end is really kind of nice and tight. And then you get a really nice tone too. Something that I learned from Rich Brown, a great bassist in Toronto, is if you take the tone right off, you can get a really nice, rich, kind of like soloing voice too if you're moving up the neck on the bass. It's kind of a nicer, darker, like almost kind of vocal quality. And I love this this pickup too if you're using effects too. Like I've got a chorus and a delay here, and you can do volume swells on it as well, like this. Let's see here. So a really creative bass. I just love it. And you know, it's a passive bass, but between having access and doing, you know, some of the like guitar players tricks with those volume swells, it's a really creative bass and just extremely solid, and great for the road and you know, for just a great all-around stable bass. This is the Yamaha limited edition Peter Hook signature model bass, and it's a beauty with the transparent red and the one kind of like a neck pickup that it has with an active passive preamp. You know, one of the things we were talking about this earlier is I discovered that Paul McCartney for a few years played a Yamaha BB1200, I think, that is based essentially almost identical bass, minus the active preamp. And it's got a really nice sound that's different from a P bass. It's got a really nice low end to it. And it's got its own voice, separate from a typical P bass that we're all so familiar with and heard on so many records. So that's one of the things I love about this. If you're looking for your own voice or something slightly different, this is a great bass for that. I know you guys are all familiar with Joy Division and Peter Hook, and this is a tune that I wrote, and it's kind of like loosely inspired by him, but gives you the same kind of vibe. And I'm gonna kick the active preamp on this one, which kind of helps the pick and chorus, in which case I have here on the HX Stomp, to just kind of speak a little bit more. really, just to play this bass just feels really good. Very inspiring. Even if you're playing fingers, it still works really nicely. And if you're doing some upper register playing too, it's got a really nice upper register to it. And as well for bass chording, it just has a really nice kind of like a bit of a transparent mid-range, so it lets the voicings of bass chords just speak really nicely. So that opens up a lot of doors for creativity with this bass. It's really incredible. Yeah, this is a Billy Sheehan signature Yamaha model, and it's kind of a deceiving bass because it's, on the first appearance, it looks kind of like a really modern bass. And in actuality, it was designed, Billy Sheehan spent a lot of time trying different things out, different woods and different pickups. And I remember the first time I got my hands on one of these, I was actually, what's going on here? There's a disconnect, because this feels like a vintage instrument, but it's got a kind of a modern look to it, and some scalloped frets here and whatnot. And so it's a kind of a deceiving bass because a lot of people think that it might only be good for Billy Sheehan type of rock, like for tapping or playing heavier. In actuality, in getting to know this bass, it actually kind of reads like a vintage instrument. And it's got, with one of the pickups, it's got kind of a P vibe, P bass. And it's got a really nice neck on it, so it feels kind of like a vintage instrument in spite of its kind of modern appearance. And then I guess on Billy Sheehan's original bass, he had taken it, a P bass, and put in a Gibson neck pickup himself. And because, as the story goes, I don't think he knew how to wire in a switch, so he just wired it separately. So it's got two separate outputs, which is kind of cool. And just to give you a little bit of the taste of the Gibson neck pickup sound. So it's got a cool vibe to it, a different tone, like a little bit more like sub. And I think he actually calls it his sub woofer or sub pickup. I think that's what he uses to get mostly low end from it. Now the interesting thing is if you start to blend them, you get this really nice, hot, warm tone. And if I favor this one a little bit, you can kind of get a really nice, it's like a P bass, but a little more bottom end. And conversely, if you dial up the P bass, you can kind of get a little more top coming through. Now, one thing that I started to explore, and with the two outputs, you can have them going to two different preamps like Billy Sheehan does, and even two different amp rigs. And for recording, that's pretty cool, because one thing that I've noticed in with some of the bass players I follow, they'll often use like a bass amp for the subs and maybe a guitar amp if they're using a pick for the top end, and then combine them. Well, with these, you can take all the sub frequencies out, throw them through whatever tone you're looking for, a clean or overdriven, and then treat the P bass pickup differently. So and that's great in recording because you can manipulate those after the fact. John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin had his jazz bass wired like that too. I've often wanted to go down that rabbit hole of even trying different effects, like a distortion on here, chorus on here. So really the creative possibilities are endless on it. It's really nice bass. This is a Yamaha TRB1004J, and it's an amazing bass. It's an octave bass, a little bit different than my BB basses, and it's got master volume, a pickup blend on it, and a 3-band active circuit. And it remains active all the time. There's no passive option. And it works, everything's really well matched. Like, so I've been enjoying it a lot of different tonal variations. You might use this one if you're looking for a little bit different place where you want the bass to sit in the music, or if, say, in a situation where there's very little tech, like let's say maybe you're plugging straight into a DI, there's no amp on stage and you're going into the PA. And you might find yourself kind of like doing your own sound from stage and going, oh, well, you know what, it's really booming here. Well, guess what, you can actively just adjust that right on the bass. Same with the mid-range and the treble. Oh, it's too bright and clangy, or it's muddy, so I can roll off the low end and crank the treble. So that's really handy in certain situations, because we do gigs with our band, the Sultans, like, and you know, and everywhere from like full production and there's a front of house person to maybe we're doing our own sound and there's no amps, only in-ears. So the active circuit is really handy that way. And also for musical situations and settings, maybe if it's something that's like a little more modern or funk, where you want the bass to sit like with a little more top end, like some styles might be funk, maybe a bit more modern funk, also like heavy rock too, where you might want a little bit more crispy sound and some nice top end. And then, you know, the amazing thing about this bass also is I have been playing with it a lot, and if you bring the master volume down a bit, because it's got quite a bit of output, you can easily mimic a passive bass. So I would do that by bringing down the output gain so it's more like a passive bass, roll off all the top end, and then maybe you know, boost or play with the mids a bit, and you can actually get a pretty amazing passive bass sound on it too. So it's, yeah, for sure, yeah. So like, so one of the first things I did with this bass was, can you get a good P bass sound out of it? And so here's like, I'm just gonna put everything flat, and this is the kind of sound you would get like straight flat. Now that, to me, my ear, has a bit more of kind of like a hi-fi top end, like a lot of like maybe like 8K kind of sizzle there. So what I would do to get a bit of a more vintage tone is like, let's dial the treble right off, and then bring down the gain a bit, and then from there I'll just sample it and go, use my ears. And then maybe, well, you know what, my P bass might have a little bit like a passive P bass, maybe a little bit more low end. So I go, I'm kind of muting with my left hand right now also. So right away I'm getting a little bit closer, and then just to A-B that with a more modern tone, this is flat. Now, there's a lot more top-end information on there, but if I went to palm mute and did kind of maybe a bit more of a modern sort of style, right away I'm kind of a bit more, you know, hi-fi sounding, and so that's what I love about this bass, is it's kind of like able to get a number of different sounds, like from vintage to modern.
I don't know if I've ever heard the top end of the bass sound that clear and even.
Yeah.
Can you do that again?
Oh, sure, yeah. 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 So this is flat, and a bit of the rear pickup sound, which kind of gives it a bit more clarity, but it's the clarity is really great. And Particularly, I'm guessing it's because of the 35-inch scale, you're getting like a bit of extra clarity too. So it's one kind of like fringe benefit of this bass.
How much compression do you have dialed in here? Because it sounds like beautifully compressed. Like, are you doing a lot here?
Okay, so there's a little thing that I really love about great instruments is there's 0 compression rate on it right now. And like normally you might have to put a compressor on that, but I love instruments that are kind of self-compressed, if that makes any sense. And you know, I have a few older vintage instruments, and when you go to play on the G string, they're a bit louder than the rest of the strings, but with this bass, it's voiced just really nicely, and it's almost like it's compressed itself.
You reminded me, like, that idea that an electric instrument should sound good acoustically is something that I noticed right away with this Mixter and Telly. Like, and in fact, I'll often, 90% of the time when I'm at home and I'm playing it, it's not even plugged in. And it sounds good enough just acoustically that I feel like I don't need to plug it in. Like, I'm still getting the vibe and I'm still getting the sound of the instrument. Yeah, that's just, like, you reminded me that, oh yeah, that was the experience I had with this guy. And like, honestly, I would say none of my other electrics are like that. Like, I get them out and it's like, yeah, okay, but I really want to plug them in. Whereas this guy, it just sounds great, you know? Like, there's obviously you can't hear it because I've got the volume down, but there's a clarity and an evenness and like, you know, like you can hear every note of a chord, even though it's not plugged in. It's just strings rattling on a piece of wood, but it sounds great anyway.
It's kind of a cliche, but once you have all the gear figured out, you can just forget about all that stuff and then just play music, connect with the audience, and connect with yourself and what you want to express. And that's pretty cool. It's pretty high up there, you know, to be able to achieve that. I've been looking for a combo amp that was A, light and portable, and B, had a great sound, and not necessarily in that order, all package deal, right? And it's kind of a tall order to fill. Like, bass amps are traditionally heavier to get kind of a better tone. So that's why I love this Rocket Bass 112, because it kind of acts like a B15, because it's got a big enough cabinet that'll let you get some really decent low end. And the preamp, although it's simple, is really versatile. And I figured out a way to turn the overdrive channel into a preamp, basically, like so that you can drive the preamp stage. I have a long history with 12s. It's kind of Captain Obvious stuff, but like a 12 is a bit tighter than a 15. Now, I find in this day and age, when I'm on a stage and there's subs and everything, I don't need to provide all the low end for the room. And a lot of times, you know, I'm on a gig and I actually want a tighter sound that can bring a bit more of the top end out and welcome the 12. It gives you more low end than a 10, and it's a bit tighter than a 15, and you get a bit more like clarity. Okay, well, I discovered right out of the box that flat, it sounds great, which I love. It's got a nice combination of kind of what like a vintage nice B15 might sound like, with a few bells and whistles of a slightly modern edge. And I'd love to show you. Yeah, we can check that out. So,
can we hear it flat?
Yep, I'm gonna plug it into the main input here. and just play it flat, straight up. So this is without the bright. So a little less top, and then we just push the bright in, and you can hear right away a bit more top end, and that's great. If I want to grab a pick, I just hit that button and you're off to the races. And that's great because I don't have to adjust the EQ or anything. It's like all ready to go. The low boost button there too, which is great, especially if you're doing a little bit more kind of like reggae stuff. Or maybe like a more Motown. Where you're really getting into the subs there. So without having to turn the EQ knobs and just using those two buttons, you've got quite a nice variety of tones.
Cool.
Yep. And now if I engage the SGT overdrive channel, let's check that out. And I'm gonna put everything kind of like at noon here on the grit channel. And I'll turn up the gain a bit so we're matched there. So nice if you're doing like a rock thing. Now, a little trick that I figured out is sometimes I'm looking for that amp sound when you're just driving a little bit, but it's not quite fully distorted. And I found that if I turn these controls on the distortion channel all the way down, you'll hear here. I'm gonna turn the master up. Bit of distortion in there, and so I was like, well, how can I get just like a little bit less distortion? And with all of my amps, one of the things that I love doing across the board is driving the preamp stage or the gain, and then tweaking the master up as needed. And it's a little trick that I love doing with this amp, but you put it in the, I think it's a -15 for active basses input.
Okay.
And then the trick is you crank up the overdrive channel to, you know, I would say like not quite full, but maybe like 45, or actually not 45%, 75%. And then I'll just get a nice level here. And then I'll just give you a demo of this. I really love this sound. So this bass is a little hotter. I'm just going to dial it back even a little bit more on the distortion channel. And to me, there's a little bit less distortion there. So it's kind of like if you plug it into the lower input, it's like a little trick to get a little less distortion. And it really, really reminds me of just driving the front end on an amp, like the preamp stage. And even with the HX Stomp that I'm using, there's a drive control. And it reminds me of that, where you can just kind of get a little bit of tube grit. So yeah, I love it.